Hello and welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Kimber Marie. I am a first year IP and brand protection associate at ESCA Legal, and today I'm joined by one of our partners, Nicole. Nicole, how are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing good. We've been here before in our little virtual chat room over
Yeah,
on Legal Lounge for ESCA's YouTube channel, but I wanted to bring you over to my YouTube channel to talk about some pop culture events. But before we do that, I'd love it if you could introduce yourself a little bit and how you ended up at ESCA.
sure. So my name is Nicole Dolgon. I'm a partner at ESCA. I lead our firm's commercial practice, which really means that I represent a lot of brands, creators, talent, in a lot of their brand-oriented deals and their commercial transactions. I have known Francesca for a very long time. I was one of her clients when I was working for Ellen DeGeneres, and she was at Denton's. And we worked, so well together in a working relationship back then, and just always stayed in touch as a friend, as a mentor to me. So when the opportunity arose for me to join ESCA, it was also the perfect time for me as my career began to develop and take shape. So I've been with the firm for, it'll be 2 years in October, and it's been fantastic, as I'm sure you can attest. We have a lot of fun.
Yes, a lot of fun. And you've also recently started your own podcast, Beyond
Yes.
the Print. So maybe give a little pitch about that for people who might be interested.
Sure. So Beyond the Fine Print is my podcast. You can find it on Apple Podcasts. You can find it on Spotify. I interview general counsel, CEOs, CMOs, business development leaders from brands that we both represent and also brands that we consume and enjoy on a daily basis. And it's really trying to bridge the gap between legal and brands. That legal is not, some type of scary taboo from a brand perspective, but really an ally and an asset as they scale and grow their companies. So we talk about interesting deals or collaborations the brand has done, how legal has assisted them, how legal has been able to highlight issues and help them resolve those issues. So it's been really enlightening conversations. We've had fantastic guests, and interviewing is a lot of fun.
Yes, it is. And that's definitely why one of the many reasons I wanted you to be my first guest for this series on my channel. There's been a couple of events, a lot of events going on in pop culture, but two of them I really wanted to talk about with you because of the overlap that it can have with brands and the legal side of branding. And
Sure.
so we'll kind of just dive right into it. The two subjects we'll be talking about today are going to be Taylor Swift getting her master's back, and then
Hmm.
the P Diddy controversy. And so let's end on a good note. So we're going to start with the P Diddy stuff, just because
Sure.
a little bit of
Yeah,
a
that's
heavy
the way to do
subject.
it. Start with a negative and end with a positive.
Exactly. And so for those watching, most people know P. Diddy trial is wrapping up this week.
Yeah.
We should be hearing shortly, the jury's decision. And what I wanted to ask you about on this subject is when it comes to brands working with celebrities and
Mhm.
events like this happening where something
Yeah.
comes out, it's a huge scandal or something horrific like what's going on with P. Diddy. What are ways that brands can protect themselves, specifically with morality clauses? So I'd love it if you could kind of break down what morality clauses are and how they overlap with this situation.
Sure. So to take it back just a notch and educate everybody on what's going on with P. Diddy. So there have been a lot of lawsuits that have been filed against him related to sex trafficking, to rape, abuse, and largely part of a greater RICO strategy, I think is what the prosecution is trying to show. And, as a result of that, obviously, there's a lot of corporate fallout from him. These are not just allegations, these are real charges that will subject him to hundreds of years in prison, most likely. And P. Diddy is one of those celebrities that's really a household name. He's been around for a long time. He has brand deals up the wazoo, or did. And as a result, like I just said, there's a lot of corporate fallout. So what does that mean? P. Diddy has worked with a lot of brands in the past in different capacities, a brand ambassador, a partner, an endorsement. And brands have to be able to protect themselves when they're bringing on celebrity talent. Because with celebrity talent, brings in reputation, brings in credibility, and you don't want the brand and the company that you've built to be subject to criticism or scandal because you have a celebrity at the forefront who is going through, a particularly difficult time. And so one of the ways that brands can protect themselves is what's known as a morality clause. What is a morality clause? So a brand can put into an agreement what's called a morality clause, which basically says that the brand has an out on the agreement. They can terminate the agreement if the celebrity, the talent, whoever is the face of that campaign, that product, that brand, has something that puts the reputation of the brand into question. So it can be as broad or as narrow as the parties decide. So it can be narrow in the sense that, the relationship can only be terminated if these are actual charges, or it can be broad that you can cut off the relationship if it's just allegations of some type of, issue or concerning behavior or whatever. And so this allows the brand to separate themselves from the celebrity, from the partner almost immediately without penalty. So that largely looks like them being able to immediately cut off the relationship, issue a statement distancing themselves. And, if there's any unpaid fees or whatever to the celebrity, those are forfeited. So you're not really on the hook for anything for the balance of the agreement. Smart celebrities, in turn, also have a reverse morality clause, which means that if the brand does something that calls a celebrity's reputation into question, maybe their CEO makes really concerning statements, or there's an embezzlement issue or fraud or whatever, the celebrity can likewise cut off the relationship. And so that's really, on either side of the coin, a way for either party to protect themselves from these, real world circumstances and issues that do come up.
A follow-up question subject that I have with this. So I try to take off my first year associate cap and look at this from a layperson perspective. And I can see how some people would think, oh, they're just trying to save face. And the first response that I would have to that is, when it comes to contracts, people should be able to distance themselves from people who no longer align with their morals. So
Sure.
that is why it's a good thing to have.
Yeah.
But there is still that question of, and I'd love to get your thoughts on this aspect of it, when it comes to negotiating the contract. I mean, this behavior that P Diddy's been engaging in has been for years.
Yeah.
And so I would just love to get your thoughts, opinions, whether legal or in general, about when you're negotiating with a celebrity where people knew about this reputation, even though it wasn't necessarily broadcast to the public. So how does that affect negotiations? What would be your tips to brands who want to bring in a high caliber celebrity, but, there's this background of nefarious activity going on? It sounds like a very obvious question, but, there were businesses that had these partnerships with him. And then when shit hit the fan, for lack of a better word, they distance themselves. And so it can just seem very icky. So what are your thoughts on that?
It's really incumbent upon the brand and the company to do their due diligence beforehand. Yeah. It is, there's a lot of money at stake here, right? And reputational risk at the end of the day is also financial risk. So the brand really needs to come into the partnership fully aware of that person's reputation. If there has been chatter or gossip around that individual, and really take a hard look at how that will impact their brand, and structure the clause accordingly. So, all of these situations, allegations, charges, a trial, a statement, a DUI or whatever, those moments go viral almost immediately. And so being able to cut off the relationship almost immediately is likewise important. So regardless, at the end of the day, the brand really needs to go into it with eyes wide open. And, sometimes the brands are working with a celebrity because of their reputation, right? Take reality stars, for
Yeah.
example. Like sometimes they're known for their big mouth or they're known for their drunken antics or whatever, and they align with a liquor company, for example. Well, if that person is arrested for public indecency because they were drunk and they're known for being drunk all the time, well, like, do you really have cause to terminate that relationship if you knew that that was what you were getting into? So at
Mhm.
the end of the day, it just really is important for the brand to analyze all the facts, the reputation, do their due diligence, and make sure, like you said, that there's real alignment from a moral perspective at the end of the day.
While you were talking about, the brand partnerships coming out because of someone's reputation, I just had flashbacks to all the ads I've seen of Bravo celebrities, for
Yeah.
example, fallout from Vanderpump Rules when the comments were made about, Tom Sandoval never keeping the house stocked with like toilet paper and batteries or something like that. I think it was
And then she got
Ariana.
a brand deal out of it. I
Yes.
know. I mean, these brands and the talent, they're really, really clever.
Yes,
Really,
they
really
are.
clever. Take advantage. The time is money, like capitalize on that momentum and get your brand deal.
Yes. Let's go to a more positive subject. Taylor
Sure.
Swift getting her master's back. I wanted to get your thoughts on this because it's great that she got them back. But the big question I had when I saw this headline was, how did this happen in the first place?
Yeah.
And there was a lot of back and forth over the years with this subject. So I would love to get your thoughts on what would your advice be to up and coming musicians, artists who are engaging with recording companies or just companies, basically offering to take them on as some sort of client.
Yeah.
Like, what should they be wary of to kind of avoid this situation?
Sure, an excellent question. So this really happens a lot, both musicians, but also for a lot of celebrities in their career development phase. We saw a version of this happen with Jessica Simpson and her lifestyle brand when the company that she worked with ended up selling to, I think, a different private equity firm or whatever. And along with that sale came her IP, and she was just further removed from regaining ownership. So it's kind of a very similar situation to what happened with Taylor Swift. So what happened with Taylor was she signed with a record company, and in that recording deal, she gave over she gave the label ownership over her master recordings. What are master recordings? Master recordings are the originals, and that allows the artist to monetize. It allows them to license, it allows them to get royalties. That's really where the money is. And so the record company that she contracted with retained ownership over all of her originals in partnership with her and really, in consideration for career development. I promise you, we're going to launch your career. You give us the rights and the ownership to all of your originals. In 2019, that record company sold to Scooter Braun, who she already had a kind of uneasy relationship with. So the sale of the company to Scooter included all of her originals. So she removed her, or she was further removed from all of her IP,
Mhm.
even further. And so since she didn't own the originals, but she owned what's called the composition, she was the songwriter, she was able to re-record all of her songs, which are known as, Taylor's versions.
Mhm.
And so many contracts include what's called a re-recording restriction, which is essentially this, for a certain period of time, you can't re-record. You can't do it all over again because then it negates the rights that we have in the originals. But her re-releases have been super successful. And regardless, she's been able to tour and entertain and use her originals. But that was obviously a really big pride point for her because not just is she a super successful artist, she's a songwriter for all of these tracks, especially the old ones. And so not having the rights and the ownership to her masters was, I'm sure, emotionally pretty devastating for her. So what I understand is she took all of the proceeds from her hugely successful tour and bought back her masters. And that's, really wonderful. So at the end of the day, it really offers up a lot of lessons to artists and to musicians and to celebrities and talent or whatever, really relative to ownership, right? That ownership really, really matters at the end of the day. It's pretty pretty standard to give up master ownership in exchange for career development, but you have to track where that ownership goes and
Mm.
negotiate for future leverage. So what does that look like? It looks like maybe asking for a right of first refusal. Before you sell away my ownership, my originals, my masters, give me the right to buy it back first. And if I don't have the funds to buy it back, or I don't want to buy it back at that point, or I can't match that price, then you can go. But at least, the artist is part of the process and they know. And it gives them, the chance to bid on that before it goes to a random third party. So really being able to negotiate for future leverage if you can't retain full rights in the first instance is really the biggest lesson from all of that. And, was that an opportunity for her? We'll never know. There has been chatter that there were a lot of instances throughout their career where she had the opportunity to buy it back and she didn't. Maybe she was trying to make some type of PR statement against Scooter. Again, we'll never really know what the deal is there. But at the end of the day, making sure that you can track where your ownership goes and negotiate for future leverage through a buyback, through a right of first refusal. Those are the things that I would push for if that were my client.
Okay, and that leads to a quick follow-up question before we close out, because the another interesting aspect of this is she signed the contract, right, when she was an up-and-coming artist, and
Yeah,
so it's ideal that they have these clauses in place, but there's still that power dynamic of you have the company with a lot of resources and then the
sure.
up and coming artist that doesn't have as many resources. So what are your thoughts on that? Like how can an artist negotiate in an environment where maybe they don't feel empowered to negotiate,
Yeah,
or like what are your thoughts on that? Because that can be kind of a whole other side to it.
absolutely.
Yeah.
You're totally spot on. There's a complete power imbalance. And particularly when Taylor was starting out, there was no social media at that time. So
Right.
now, if somebody has a big social media following, sometimes the brand or the company wants them so much, and that talent actually has a little bit of leverage. But back in the day, and now obviously to some extent for sure, there's certainly a power imbalance. You hire great counsel that advises you of the risks. You consistently stay involved, tracking where your rights go and who has ownership over it. But I'd be remiss to say that there's, not a power imbalance there. There absolutely is one, particularly when it's kind of it's not necessarily a pay for play, but it's like you give us ownership, we'll give you career development and resources. That's what the structure is. And it's really hard, but you put a timeline into the agreement with the hope of being able to get those rights back.
Right. So just really, I guess, empowering, especially in 2025, where so many people like you can do your due diligence online and like find ways of what are artists that really handled their IP really well, and then try and mirror that in your
Yeah,
negotiations and making sure that you yourself are reading what you're signing.
sure.
And of course, getting legal counsel on your side to advocate for your best interests where possible. And so yeah, we're both biased since we're both legal counsel, but I think it's great advice all around to always have someone to advocate on your behalf. And so, yeah, I'm incredibly grateful for your time, Nicole, and speaking
Sure.
on these two pop culture moments. And for those watching, you can follow Nicole on her socials. Nicole, I'll let you give a plug there where people can find you online.
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram at Nicole Dolgon, ESQ, which is the abbreviation for Esquire. And you can find me on ESCA Legal's firm website. So I'm happy to chat with anybody.
Awesome. And y'all can find me at Kimber Marie James. Please subscribe below and leave a comment on your thoughts about Taylor Swift, P. Diddy, and any other pop culture moments you'd like to discuss. Thanks, Nicole.
Thank you.